So welcome back to this tactical intellectual retrieval channel. This is part of the massacre series here, and we're speaking of the little known New Orleans massacre back in Reconstruction times, that era right there. So we want to start off by playing a clip of this video here just to get your mind primed for the subject matter here. Pressing play right now.
NOPD Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick, Mayor Cantrell, and other city officials issued an apology today for one of the bloodiest massacres in the city's history. It happened on this day 158 years ago. Even though it was a landmark event, the 1866 Mechanics' Institute massacre became a painful piece of hidden history. The Plessy and Ferguson initiative hopes to change that by unveiling that historical marker. It not only acknowledges the victims, but it shares how brutal the massacre was and how it was connected to radical change in Congress during the Reconstruction era. Sharice Gibson reports.
It's reported between 40 and 50 people died that day, mostly black. Hundreds of black innocent bystanders were also targeted.
The year prior to the massacre was when the state legislature actually moved into the Mechanics' Institute.
Okay.
So that was the reason that the convention met there.
In the early stages of the Reconstruction era, laws were passed to give greater freedoms to black people, but they still had no voting rights and were under Code Noir or Black Code.
It was a precursor to what would have been a constitutional convention. So the convention had taken place in 1864,
Gotcha.
And they had passed a lot of things, but one thing that they left unresolved was black male suffrage.
Right.
And so some of the radicals who were in the legislature at that time called to reconvene because the war was over.
People attempting to meet at the Mechanics' Institute that day hoped to set a date for a new convention.
They were led by a drummer. There was a man carrying an American flag.
Harper's Weekly, a national magazine based out of New York City, drew illustrations depicting what led up to the deadly events, shown here by Nick Weldon of the Historic New Orleans Collection. Before that meeting could take place, almost 200 black men, reportedly unarmed military veterans, paraded up Canal Street to show their support for black suffrage. As they approached the Mechanics' Institute, they were immediately met with violence by a white mob of former Confederates, police officers, and firefighters, and sent by then New Orleans Mayor John Monroe, who was also a Confederate sympathizer.
And almost immediately, they began firing upon the marchers. And so what we see here are scenes of what happened after the black marchers came into the hall. There were white supporters and delegates in the convention. And as you can see here, just complete violence. The marchers and the delegates were defenseless. Congress sent a delegation to interview witnesses of the massacre, and their report laid the groundwork for sweeping national changes.
Changes that would push radical Republicans into office, leading to the Reconstruction Acts.
So this leads to the ratification of what we call the Reconstruction Amendments, 13th beginning with the abolition of slavery. The 14th and 15th Amendments were passed. The 15th was eventually ratified by 1870. So this all influenced the national kind of political tenor that enabled these amendments to the Constitution to be passed.
It also disenfranchised and removed supporters of the Confederacy in public office and enabled a lot of black men to attain legislative office. While publications of that dreadful time in American history give us a glimpse into the country's difficult transition into the Reconstruction era, the only monuments that seemed to go up represented the fallen Confederacy. No mention of the black men and women who perished that day, though they paid for the freedoms of black people across the country with their lives.
158 years have gone by and they have not been recognized.
Keith Plessy of the Plessy and Ferguson initiative worked alongside others to put up a marker to finally recognize their sacrifice. It's just one of several markers they've placed around the city. Though the buildings no longer stand, the true story remains and can now be shared for generations to come.
We intend to take the history, because it has been whitewashed so much, for our events that have happened in history that should be recalled. The main goal that we're trying to reach is unity within the city and within the state.
Unity during a time of political peril, so more than 150 years later, we can avoid history repeating itself. Sharice Gibson, WWL, Louisiana.
So naturally, after a video clip is shown, we're going to segue into an article regarding this New Orleans Massacre topic. And here I'm showing an NPS.gov article, and it's entitled "An Absolute Massacre, the New Orleans Slaughter of July 30th, 1866. And the first paragraph, the bottom sentence, okay, it's talking about the Civil War ending, but then it says that the violence was far from over. White resistance to black citizenship during Reconstruction often turned violent, as it did in New Orleans on July 30th, 1866. All right, so let's gather more information from this article here. So this portion of the article tells us that a year after Lincoln's death, a lot of the Southern Confederate states, they gained or regained their power, and it was via President Andrew Johnson, and he began to enact black codes, the Code Noir throughout the South. And then it says, well, it mentions the Memphis Massacre, where a bunch of redneck Irish cops, they started mobbing up and letting that Yamnayan mentality just take control, and they was killing, robbing, raping, looting, setting buildings on fire, displacing melanated people out of their homes. It's very interesting that the image and trope of the black brute, that mythological figure, took hold and was attached on our people, but the white brute wasn't a thing for real. I guess the title of father, brother, uncle, grandfather, etc. was more appropriate in their minds. But we gotta let this truth out, man, to be honest. And I mentioned this on the Black Brute presentation, that the mythological nature of the Black Brute, which was propaganda at its start, was nothing more than justification in regards to a slow genocide that they wanted to carry out against our people. Hey, you free them, okay, let's put black codes to put them right back in slavery, and the ones that didn't make it, we're gonna just knock them all off. And this is generations deep after slavery, and we see it in this Reconstruction era. I'm highlighting this theme in the consecutive massacres that happened. So our people have been fighting, but like I say, that trope is existing even in our day, 2025. So our people gotta kill this thing, just like in the movie The Thing, that organism that really was hard to kill. You just had to completely burn it with fire. These harmful stereotypes and tropes that have been attached to us is nothing more than the product of projection from those who are, I guess, levying these charges against us. The reality is that you're not gonna find in any record book or historical article, publication, whatever, you're not gonna find it on radio or on TV of any era, our people doing what they've done. That's really a part of that usurper culture that they have. Overthrow, move in, set up shop, and keep the originals out. Displacement and economic disruption. Social trauma is a real thing, and the descendants of the people who were socially traumatized, you see us walking around today. We don't have anything and we're being denigrated for it. All right, but listen, we have a record, on our side, melanated people, we have a record of being the victim. So we already know what that's like, but what you think it's like being the descendant or the people who have a record of being the perpetrators, the violent, savage perpetrators of these crimes? What you think that's like? What type of mentality are they gonna be in? So let's go ahead and move forward with the article here. Now, this part says, a little over a week following the Memphis Massacre, tensions continue to rise in New Orleans as the city's former mayor and Confederate sympathizer John T. Monroe entered the office he had been expelled from just 4 years prior. Monroe's return to power embodied the ideals which radical Republicans had long despised. and thus decided that action needed to be taken. This effort came in the form of reconvening the 1864 Constitutional Convention with the goal of extending suffrage toward freedmen, eliminating black codes, and pursuing the disfranchisement of ex-Confederates. Louisiana Supreme Court Judge R.K. Howell was to preside over the reconvened convention and declared the date of gathering to be July 30th. Mayor Monroe declared the meeting an unlawful assemblage and reached out to General Absalom Bayard for federal support in arresting the convention delegates. Bayard, however, maintained that the purpose of his command was the maintenance of perfect order and the suppression of violence. So on the next slide, we have confirmation that friction between radical Republicans and conservative Democrats was already something that was happening right there. But then let's look at this right here. This guy, New Orleans Sheriff Harry T. Hayes, he was a former Confederate general. He decided to deputize a posse of white officers who were also ex-Confederates, and the purpose was to disrupt the gathering from happening. So let's drop down a little bit. It says a growing crowd of opposition waited outside while approximately 200 unarmed freedmen, mostly Union veterans, they approached the Institute in a parade and was showing their support as the video had brought out. And so the Black Assembly neared their destination. Several bystanders harassed and assaulted them, which ignited several scuffles. Okay, so the friction really was escalated when Sheriff Hayes and his deputized redneck Confederate police force, they came on a scene and they just started letting off rounds into the crowd. Wow. And that's the start of the massacre right there. So here's the portion where I do want to read verbatim what this says here. It says, immediately after this riot assumed a serious character, the police, aided by the citizens, became the assailants, and from the evidence I am forced to believe, exercised great brutality in making their arrests. Finally, they attacked the convention hall and a protracted struggle ensued. The people inside that hall gave up, some who surrendered, and were attacked afterward and brutally treated. The swelling mob fired into the Institute with the intent to kill, and they infiltrated the meeting hall several times during the altercation to pull the inhabitants outside. Many of those who tried to surrender were struck down or shot. When reporting his findings to Ulysses S. Grant at the War Department, General Phil Sheridan noted that the peaceful delegates and supporters were attacked with firearms, clubs, and knives in a manner so unnecessary and atrocious as to compel me to say that it was murder. It was not, or it was no riot. It was an absolute massacre by the police, which was not excelled in murderous cruelty by that of Fort Pillow. It was a murder which the mayor and police of the city perpetrated without the shadow of a necessity. That's just their way of saying that this was so unnecessary right here. They should not have even thought of doing that. But that's that lack of impulse control, huh? So here's the effects of this New Orleans massacre here. Now, on top of social traumas being felt by the melanated community, now displacement, I'm sure, was something that happened because parents were lost, caretakers were lost probably. On top of economic disruption, let's look at what it says here. It says, in a matter of approximately 2 hours, 34 African American supporters were killed, while the wounded numbered 119. 3 of the delegates who had assembled in the Mechanics Institute were killed, while 17 were wounded, and approximately 200 others arrested. Now, General Bayard had to order martial law, which remained into effect or remain in effect into early August. Now, let's look at what these newspapers said, the northern newspapers. They said, remember that this work was done by the constituted authorities of the city of New Orleans, rebels in record and in heart, but placed in power over loyal men by the policy of a renegade president. Remember that these scenes are but a prelude of what is to be, if Mr. Johnson's policies shall be carried out. So all in all, this was a great tragedy, and we don't really speak about it enough in our modern day, present day. But the crazy thing about it is that the descendants of these people are still here. They probably carry the beliefs of their Confederate ancestors. And the crazy thing is they want to denigrate and I guess disrespect by throwing out that 13 or 14 or 15 equals either 54 or 90% of all violent crimes. You know, that's their battle cry to the descendants of the victims. You know, and it's crazy to me. You know, what type of state of mind do you have? You have to be really delusional to kind of be on that type of time right there, and to, I guess, pass those beliefs down from generation to generation. And we know that happens. Just look on YouTube videos or just peruse the comments sections of the various national newspaper article websites, and you'll see a lot of crazy, unhinged, and delusional comments that are all racial in nature. And I can't really sit back and let myself or my people be denigrated by people who have many serial killers in their lineage. You know, you're like 2 generations removed, maybe 1, you know, or you have some old people that probably carried these things out with their bare hands back in the interwar period, if not Jim Crow. So, I mean, I can't sit back and let that stuff happen. It just, that bothers me right there. I'm hearing 15 equals 54 or 15 equals 92. And I'm like, yo, y'all gotta get y'all stuff together, man. You're throwing out things as, you know, you believe mythical lies. I mean, and then you want to lash out violently against our people. Nah, that genocide cannot happen. Can't stand for it, man. We gotta have these facts to combat it, you know. Now, speaking of facts and presenting those facts with the aim of telling the truth to combat bad propaganda, it's no secret I consider myself to be basically a YouTube commenter who decided to make video presentations. And I definitely like to look at other content creators just to get myself in that right frame of mind and find inspiration when I speak on these type of topics like this. So I am influenced by this Moment of Truth crime report segment that he does, and you know, it's very necessary, definitely. And also I like what the creator Drummer 1980 does in his The Other Side segments, where he basically highlights and showcases white crime, the Stankian crime element, and it's very numerous, and it goes against the narrative or the idea that 15 or the melanated population is responsible for 52 or even 92% of all violent crime, because he's highlighting like 4 or 5 different stories per segment. Now, I'm definitely inspired by these 2 great creators with what they're doing and highlighting the crime for the other side. So I want to roll out my version, and it's called Continuing Tradition, because this is a very useful tool. And since I'm doing a massacre series that's kind of like in the past, now my Continuing Tradition segment is the present day showcase of the criminal exploits of the descendants of these people that we're reading about in the massacre series. Everybody that's in these sundown towns around the USA, we're showing their present day versions, and they are continuing a tradition. So that's really gonna put a banana in the tailpipe, so to speak, on this whole, you know, y'all black people commit 52 or 90% of the violent crimes in the US. Nah, we just gonna show you, yo, you guys are stat stupid. Y'all don't even factor in the wrongful conviction rates when it comes to these melanated crime stats that you look at from the FBI website or database. See, you guys have to know that y'all have trash ideology. Y'all live how we don't live. Y'all do things that we don't do. And y'all think that y'all merda smells like poopery or potpourri. Nah, we gotta show you, man. You guys stink. The goal is to come full circle with information, and that affects the mentality. And hopefully we can go on from there. All right, so we definitely have to look at this one from the Law and Crime website. Let's see. He says one of us has to die by midnight. Man told 911 to bring the coroner after blasting roommate in the head with a shotgun. And you see Cody Vernon Kolstad and then Brian Daniel Stokel. Obituary. Okay. I wonder if he had a father in his life, you know, because they say that about us all the time. So here's the headline for you. Father believed to have killed entire family in apparent murder-suicide on son's high school graduation day. Man, I wonder what they look like. Well, hey, wonder no more. Here they are right here. Now, I'm going to read the print underneath the picture. According to the Nebraska State Patrol, it is believed that Jeremy Koch, 42, killed each of his sons, Hudson and Asher, and his wife, Bailey, before taking his own life. Okay. Let's move on to the next headline, and it says, Florence murder suspect accused of hitting missing woman with car, returning for body. Okay, here's the picture right here. See him with the two cops. Okay, Logan Rogers was charged with murder after human remains believed to be of 38-year-old Autumn Page Strickland were found at the home where he was arrested. That can't be it. They're kind of light on information. Alright, let's check out the other headline. Kia driver circled back to hit woman a second time before returning to the scene where he picked up victim's body and drove remains home. I bet the chances of necrophilia are high with this one. They definitely need to look into that also. Alright, so here's my last one for the day, and here's the headline. Cool, how deep? Family texts back and forth after burying children they murdered in backyard. Dad boasts about being almost done with daughter, cops say. Alright, so the print underneath the picture, it says Elwin Crocker Sr. with his wife Candace Crocker and their 3 kids. Background, okay, so he's in court, but no doubt these are the same people that go on YouTube videos, comment sections from newspaper websites, message boards, etc., and they specifically find stories where a melanated person had a run-in with law enforcement, and then they just spew all they trash talking. That's what it is, it's trash talking, projection at a high level. And it's funny because when these stories that I just showcased are spoken of, they are nowhere to be found. It's crickets from these people. There's no denigration, no disparaging tropes. If anything, you'll probably see sympathetic comments and then you probably come on, man, they make it too easy, man. These people are just, there's really some screws loose, man, because I've actually seen The Other Side by Drummer 1980, and I've seen white people come on there and they were like, well, why are you doing this? What's the reason? A tragedy happened and blah blah blah. But I never see that when I'm online and it's a melanated person that's, you know, having some deal with the authorities. It's always, oh man, there they go again, usual suspects. 15 equals 98. Man, where was the father at? Didn't do blah blah blah, so on and so forth. I never see anybody that's sympathetic when it comes to us, you know. Matter of fact, when it comes to us, people believe in mythological ideologies. I'm doing the Black Brute video presentation, and that was based on lies, fiction, and exaggerations and projection at its finest. Now, when it comes to us, we can't expect other people to be sympathetic when it comes to us, man. We have to be sympathetic towards one another when it comes to these things. And that's the truth right there. We have to be knowledgeable of what's the truth, what's the fiction when it comes to our people. We have to know that being a black brute and criminal-minded, that's not who we are at our core. Now, I know rap and all that stuff, gangsta rap, they promote that stuff only because they don't want to promote something uplifting, in regards to our people. But we have to, we just have to grow up. We have to be intellectual when it comes to this stuff. And we have to stop looking for any type of validation from other groups, because other groups, they live in fantasy land when it comes to this stuff here. Also, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there's not a criminal element or we don't have anything to clean up in-house when it comes to the melanated community in America. I'm saying it's exaggerated, and I'm showing you it's exaggerated. This is a crucial step when it comes to rectifying a problem within the broader melanated community in the States. Now, we do have an issue that we have to stamp out, because basically crime and degenerate behavior, that's a dead end for us, man. It is no benefit to that. You probably get quick money, but hey, the quick money turns into a quick jail sentence, turns into a quick death. So we have to overcome what other groups are pushing to us, and the sellouts within our community, they glorify that type of stuff. So they're getting a check from outside. Yeah, I'll have more to say, but I don't want to be chirping and rambling for the duration of this video presentation here. So I'm gonna end it here, and I'll catch you guys later.